Hello and welcome to this deep dive session on facilitating discussions. My name is Alex McGale and I am the Learning and Development Manager on this program. Let's talk two-way communication. Two-way communication is essentially where you put all of the things that we've covered all together, and this works with your mentee in the way that we've seen before. So asking the right questions, active listening, using some of those SMART goals to bring out various different things put together shows that there's a two-way communication happening. And in essence, you are giving elements of your story, your experience, different flavors, directions, opinions, whatever else that's appropriate, and also allowing them to do the same. Each person needs to feel as if they've been heard, and also having a steady direction in the flow of conversation is basically what people are looking for. However, there are many more things to consider as you're communicating. Personal touches such as humor and relatability, clarity, and also tone are very important. Let's think about tone for a second. Authoritative tones may seem abrasive and cause friction, and speaking to people as if they're an adult and asking genuine questions can help to avoid this. The second you start adopting a parent-child relationship, it can break down that two-way communication, where usually one person starts to get defensive and usually gets quite combative in the way that they speak, which often leads to confrontation. When you're speaking with someone, and especially when you're asking questions, there are a variety of different responses that you could get in return. Let's spend some time to go through some of these different types of responses that you may get. And the first one is probably the one that we all want: honesty. Honesty and direct responses are typically what we want to receive. And in order to get these responses, it's incredibly important to create a safe space for both parties to trust each other and navigate in. You could, on the other hand, get lies. And lies being masked as truths can often find their way into the conversation. You may pick out on a lie based on a number of different things, such as how plausible the response is. Also non-verbal cues and non-verbal communication, such as the body language that we've discussed in other videos, may also help you to kind of navigate when someone has actually lied to you. And non-verbal communication, such as body language, like we spoke in the other videos before, may also be a clear indication as to when someone is lying to you. In these instances, you'd need to use your emotional intelligence to figure out whether you should probe further, or even just note the potential discomfort in your question and navigate around that as appropriate. Sometimes it's just too soon to ask that question, so you may need to park that question for another time once there's a better relationship between you and the respondent. So let's look at the other types of responses that you may get. Those are just the two that we've seen, and to be honest, those are the most popular and seemingly the most seen. However, there are technically 6 different subtypes beneath these 2 main types, and I'll go through a number of these. First of all, you may receive a response which is completely out of context. You may get a response which is where the respondent says something that's completely unconnected and irrelevant to the question, or even attempts to change the topic. In these situations, you may want to rephrase and reword that question to emphasize the point that you were getting at. If this still ends up as being a complete left direction or right direction in the way that the person is answering, it may be just one of those things that you need to leave alone. In some cases, people may give you a half answer or even a partial answer rather than the full answer that you're looking for. People are often very selective about what parts of the question that they want to address, especially if they're tricky and also very emotionally charged questions that you're asking. In some cases where you're going to give a couple of different questions, they may be sensitive to one or even a couple of different questions, and they may answer some but ignore others. Again, it's up to you whether you wish to rephrase, set the scene and then ask again, or maybe if you just feel that this is too sensitive, you might just want to leave this topic alone until a later date, or maybe just leave it alone forever. It's completely your call. In some cases, you may catch some people avoiding to answer this question, as you can see this guy hiding. It's a skill that's used by politicians incredibly frequently, where they're asked a difficult question, and in some cases, these people avoid the question altogether. This is often seen as a defense mechanism against giving a negative answer to the question. So politicians love this, as you can imagine. How to spot this is usually quite difficult, but you might see that people will answer a question with another question, therefore diverting the attention from your question that they may not want to answer, or even draw attention to a positive aspect in the topic or the answer, so that way it negates the direction and the focus on some of the negative or some of the more challenging things in the answer that they really could be giving to you. It's not technically a lie, it's still honest, but it is quite a difficult thing to navigate. These are incredibly difficult, and if you need an answer, be very clear to refer that this is a safe space. You are looking to build trust, and maybe you just need to give them some more time. Give them that time and give them that space to be able to answer, and it may be also worthwhile just simply asking, is it okay for me to ask this question? Would it be better for us to talk about this another time? Leave it down to the mentee to tell you whether they're comfortable or not. Some people will wait it out and not quite just avoid the question, but they'll just start stalling. This is sometimes spotted when someone asks or even gives themselves more time to construct an acceptable answer. There are some phrases like, "That's a good question. Let me expand upon that by starting with, all of that stuff is just filler, that's stalling." Then they may get to the meat of their answer. Another way to stall, allowing for more time to think, is by asking questions. Now, if you've received a question and then you ask another question in return, that makes the person who delivered that first question to you have to think, have to respond, buying you some time to create the answer that you want to give. And again, this can be very tricky to navigate, but it gives the respondent time. Don't be too harsh on this, because in some cases, some people just need time to kind of think, but they don't want that awkward silence. That's perfectly fine. Give them that space. In other cases, you may just see a complete refusal from the respondent, and they just don't want to answer this question. This can be done either by, telling you that they're not going to answer that question, or they may just remain silent and look puzzled or give off some body language which shows you as a clear sign that they're not very comfortable. And this could be a very clear sign that the question that you've asked is uncomfortable for the respondent, or that you need to establish more trust between the both of you in your relationship before they can answer that question. Nonetheless, it's not necessarily a bad thing, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. Having the open space to be able to say, okay, I can see that you don't want to answer that question. Do you want some more time, or shall we move on to something else? Could be a great way to just navigate away from something that may be uncomfortable. Two-way communication is incredibly simple, but that doesn't mean to say that it is easy. Often the most simple things are actually quite difficult. It takes mutual understanding, consent, questioning, active listening, and many more personal touches that are personal to you and also to the person that you speak to. I haven't even touched upon humour or any of that good stuff that you will naturally have and inject into the conversation. As you've seen through this session, there have been a number of different ways in which people can respond, and it's down to you to think about what their responses are and use your emotional intelligence to navigate the conversation appropriately. Whether you ask more questions, whether you give a simple statement, whether you actually step away from that question and that topic altogether. This is something that you may also want to look into in your boundary setting. So as a way of making sure that you don't cross any boundaries, you simply ask, is this okay for me to talk about this, or ask you questions on that. As always, if you've got any questions on any of this stuff, please send me an email. Thank you so much for watching this video.